Hello and welcome to the Fundamentals of Lute Playing. My name is Laudon Schuett, and today we're going to be talking about economy of motion and preparation. These are two concepts that have sort of been infused throughout the entire course, but I thought a separate video would be helpful where we focus on this idea a little bit. As we get farther into the course, I'm finding that it's helpful to have these sort of distilled episodes where I really hone in on a single topic and get that in for the student, because I know that in the context of everything I'm talking about these things, but sometimes it's really helpful to kind of narrow that down. Now, economy of motion and preparation, in some ways, by saying both things, it's a little redundant, because if you're using economy of motion, you are preparing. But the basic concept is that whether we're talking about the right hand or the left hand, we are trying to make efficient and as simple movements as possible to achieve a sort of a choreography or an individual moment. We're breaking it down, and we are finding the best way to do it. So why is this a good idea? One, I think at first it takes a lot more work because you really have to think about what you're doing. But after a while, it makes everything easier because your fingers are closer to the strings. They're less likely to miss, to make a mistake. So I think it does result in cleaner playing. And I think it also, if you're somebody who struggles with nerves, it reduces some of the nerves because you're right there. You're very close. You know, if you're somebody whose pinky is flying out and you're playing and you have to find that C, that can be really scary. And I'm gonna do some demonstrations in this video for both beginners and for maybe some more advanced students, some ideas of what to work on. I think the hardest thing is to perhaps get used to this idea that we have to really concentrate on what each finger is doing. And that can be really challenging at first. Now, the good news is if you do it and you really, really do it, that it gets easier and easier over time. And some things do become more and more automatic. Obviously, we still want to stay on top of things and make sure that they're very clean, and we don't allow sort of I like to think of it as like a cookie factory, and we don't want any bad things getting into the cookies. We want to make sure they stay really delicious. So it's all about quality control, but it also is about making things easier. Now, there is a stereotype that some players, when they have really good economy of motion and preparation, maybe play a little mechanically. I'd argue that often that's a visual thing, that audience members are looking at a player and maybe they're not swinging around and doing this sort of thing. And there are certainly expressive players who swing around and move a lot while they play. But I think that if you close your eyes and you listen to really great players who have excellent economy of motion, that all of the dynamics and color and things are there. You're just not necessarily seeing somebody who's doing a lot of this. And that's not a knock to players who've decided to incorporate a more visual element to their playing. When I think of the classic dichotomy, maybe in the classical guitar world, you have John Williams and maybe you have Yamashita. And you've got one player who's very, very still and very, very clear, and then you have another player who's moving around and sometimes even getting out of the seat as he's playing. And I love both their styles. And I honestly think that this idea of being precise and being efficient is also being mechanical. It's very strange. I think that in many other cultures, precision and economy of motion are highly valued. But what I've noticed in Europe and in the US and some Western cultures, there's this idea that, oh, that person is not being emotional. So I'm just going to make the argument that both ways are wonderful. And I love seeing players do that. And that for you, if you're a student that has had issues with making mistakes, or you get nervous performing, or you're frustrated, economy of motion and preparation can be extremely helpful. So if you're a beginner, let's go over some basic ideas so that you can incorporate this. And again, if you've watched my other videos, it's been spread throughout. It's in there. We're just going to be talking about it specifically. So for example, if you're a beginner and you're going from A to C, you may find that you're struggling, your pinky is flying out or something like that, right? So you got A, and then your pinky, you have to bring all the way down from there. So the way to improve your economy of motion, and now we're talking about the left hand, we'll also talk about the right, but your economy of motion here is that we want that pinky to already be as close to that fret as possible before you play. So we're not scrunched up, because that's actually something that I think isn't discussed enough. We have students who have this common problem where the pinky is flying out, but we also have scrunching, which I see, where the pinky is back here and close, and so you end up having to rush over there. So our goal when we're using good economy of motion and preparation, and this is where it's sort of redundant, right? The pinky is preparing over the fret there. So really I could just say economy of motion, but just for the sake of being thorough, we're going to say economy of motion and preparation. You're going to play this first note, and then we bring the pinky down, and you play the next note. And you'll see that we didn't do this, and we didn't do this. Both of those movements add a level of tension. They add rushing to get to the note. Now, for the right hand, what does this mean? It means that, and I've mentioned this before, the purpose of the pinky being planted is to stop the movement from going too far. If we take the pinky off the fingerboard, the thumb, and I'm exaggerating, I know I'm exaggerating, but like the thumb, when we pluck down, goes way off the soundboard and you have to find your way back. So using that pinky, making sure it's really firm, and we come back. And this doesn't mean that we don't move the arm. We're still moving the arm. But I'm keeping that thumb really close. And let's say we're using the same example, A to C. And just as a reminder, I'm sort of in thumb out mode right now, and I've got nails growing out for a future episode. So if you're like, wow, the lute technique here is a little interesting, especially if you haven't seen any of my other videos, do understand that I'm prepping for a video on historical nail use and using thumb out currently to demonstrate that. So keeping close. Now, the same things that are beneficial with the left hand in a lot of ways are beneficial in the right hand. If I pluck like this, I have to bring the whole hand back. Conversely, if I pluck like this, I've got to bring the whole hand back. So particularly when we are playing quickly or we need to play fast, it is very helpful to keep the distance between your fingers and the string as small as possible. It means less work. In the previous episode, I was talking about historical thumb out technique. And then what was the one that I did after that? Oh yeah, it was stretches. Anyways, historical thumb out technique. It was actually 2 episodes back. And I was talking about basically how do we make that movement smaller by putting extra fingers down or some other techniques. The idea, though, behind all of that is that we are keeping the fingers close to the string so we don't have to work as hard to get back to it. Same thing with the left hand. We're keeping the fingers close to the strings so we don't have to move as far back. So if I had to split up economy of motion and preparation, even though I think they are combined, I would say that economy of motion is about keeping those distances small and moving in such a way that we're efficient in our movement. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm not waiting till the last second. And this is the other half of it, is you could have a really good position, you could be really prepared, you pluck, and then at the last second you throw your finger down. And that also creates tension. So the economy of motion also is, can we start moving toward that fretting so that the speed of our finger isn't going from 0 to 100 instantly, which can cause tension. What we want to do is get there, sort of prepare and get there ahead of time. And that's where the preparation comes in. We're going in and we're in economy of motion. So we're bringing that finger in like that instead of waiting till the last second and rushing. And those sort of frantic movements are what we want to get out of our playing. Usually. Now, I recognize that some players maybe decide that they want to look a little frantic, they want to look a little bit tense and exciting, and I respect that. But I think for most people, we want to get rid of that frantic element. For the right hand, it's sort of the same thing, because if I take the thumb through and then I suddenly have to rush back, it's better if I pluck and I bring my thumb back sort of in a near constant rate. And I prepare for the next pluck. Now let's say, and this is where the preparation comes in a little more, let's say my next pluck is the second string. Well, I pluck the first string, I bounce back, and I am ready to play the second string. So instead of plucking, stopping, moving, and putting the thumb onto the second course, I'm preparing by having that thumb already come back as part of the stroke. So I've built into the stroke what my next pluck is going to be. And that's sort of the preparation half of economy of motion. Now, in the left hand, what does this look like? So, for example, let's say I have something like this where I'm going, and I'm literally grabbing something randomly off the page so that I haven't done this before. But let's say I've got something like... So first of all, I play this first chord, and I see that the next note I have is this F. So my third finger is not here, it's not here, it's ready to go, right over that F. And then as soon as I play that F, I'm looking ahead to the next chord, right there, which uses 1 and 4. So D and B flat. Now I could choose to leave the F down, because that is for some extra resonance. But you'll see, I put the third finger down, and even really as I'm doing the third finger, I'm already thinking about 1 and 4. They're coming here. What I notice with beginners is that often they'll do this, then they'll do this, and then they'll sort of do that, and they'll come, or even worse, they'll go put one finger down and then the other. So what we want to do is we want to be always looking ahead and preparing for what's coming. So we have economy of motion, which is that we're trying to not, we're trying to minimize our distances. And then preparation, which just means that we're trying to look ahead to what's coming next. And our fingers are always in motion. Like that. And this may require you to really break down the movements. In some of the other videos, particularly on practicing and learning pieces, I talk about using chaining and looking at things from moment to moment. So if you are really struggling with this and you're looking at this passage, you're going, wow, Laudon just did like a whole bunch of things there. That's really complicated. Well, step one is we look at the left hand. We play that first chord, and then we look at the note that comes after it. We go, okay, so I know that this third finger is going to need to play that F next. So let's have it over. And obviously, we're not going to be sticking our fingers out. So we've got this. And we're just going to practice that. And then once we're really comfortable with that, we look at what happens next, which is we're going from this third finger to this. So we're going to just take a look at. And we go, okay. So I need to have the first finger on the fifth course, and I need to have the fourth finger on the first course. And I want to lower them at the same time. So I'm not doing this and then putting the other fingers on, keeping everything as close as possible and then dropping. And then we need to put that sequence together. And what we realize when we put the sequence together is you can actually start preparing that chord even earlier. So if I play my first chord and then I play F, you'll notice that right there, if I'm sort of wasting time, right? What I could do is play the chord, play the F, and the moment I play that F, I'm prepping 1 and 4, dropping 1 and 4. The next note I have is 2, and you'll see my second finger is going down there, right? So we've got this. And the moment I play this 2, I'm then prepping this next chord. And I'll mark this and make sure that I put the example in the description so you can see what I'm actually doing. But it ends up being like this. Or I did a G there. There we go. I did a G in the bass instead of a D. I was thinking, oh, third. Now, the right hand in this example, what I'm thinking, if and I do think it's really important to think about both hands. So I pluck the chord. I've got my index actually hovering over the second course so that it's ready to get that second note. And then when I pluck that second note, my middle and thumb then pop into position over 5 and 1. So I'm going, if I were to remove the left hand, it's... And realize I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. I'm not going like that. There's a lot of sort of wasted movement there. I'm keeping things close, and I'm going, okay, here's the thumb. You could even do something like that. You could play the first chord and pop your thumb to prepare, have it on the 5th course ready to go for the next chord, because you're not going to use the thumb before then. So you go like this. Thumb is already on the 5th course. Index plucks the 2nd course. Middle finger lands on the 1st course. And then you play the next chord. So that sequence is... You'll see there's very little movement. And if you're not comfortable with that, it is a great thing to work on, which is that you play a bass or a chord and you immediately pop. Sort of a reactive gesture. And it's a single motion, so you may need to practice that separately, just going from F to C. Now, of course, these will be F to D, because you'll have it fretted. So F to D. But you're essentially moving the thumb to the next bass note. We add in the top voice. You're doing this. We'll do that. So you're going... There we go. And really minimizing what's going on, keeping everything close. So working on the left hand separately, working on the right hand separately is really good. If you're an absolute beginner playing very simple things, this could just mean making sure that your thumb doesn't go too far away. So I pluck A, C, B flat, and that you're not doing this. And I'm exaggerating, but that's a big motion. This is all helped, of course, by having a very steady sitting position, something that's comfortable where you're really in control of the instrument. This can be, I think, players work on this their entire lives, especially when it's a priority. I know, great musicians, Paul Odette, is constantly thinking about these things. Pepe Romero, the guitarist, I know is still thinking about these things. John Williams is still recording and playing, and everybody is working on improving. So this is not something that is necessarily you're going to be done with. It's whenever you're learning a new piece of music, you're trying to find the best way to move from one note or one chord to the next, the most efficient way to do it. And of course, we're incorporating the musical elements. Of course, we're thinking about, if you're doing a roll, if I decide to do a roll on that chord, I do the roll or the séparé, and then I also prep the thumb. If I'm doing a decrescendo or a crescendo, it's the same thing. If I'm doing an articulation, that's built into it. And in fact, we build that technique. I have to silence that note, right? In that case, I'm going, dropping the thumb down on the string. So let's say I've got a short note, followed by a long note. I'm actually using that preparation to get a musical result. So we also want to incorporate the music into our economy of motion and preparation as we're learning our pieces. If you have any questions, throw them in the comment section. This is the sort of thing that how it's so much easier if I have a student in front of me and we can really break down a moment that they're working on in their music. So I understand that it may be a little difficult to get the concept across in a video where I don't know you. There's hundreds of you playing maybe different pieces and things like that. But please put some comments in the section. I'd be happy to clarify some things. And bear in mind too that there are great players that don't necessarily focus on economy of motion and preparation, and they pull off what they pull off. They just work harder to make it happen. So this is just about reducing work, making things a little bit easier. If you're nervous, it definitely reduces the chances of making mistakes. If you're enjoying the channel, best way you can support it is by subscribing. I also have my Patreon link in the description if you'd like to support in that way. Otherwise, have a wonderful week and happy looting. Bye-bye.